She's a pumper that's just on a higher level. You know, that's all. She's a pumper. In fact, if you look at Cathie Wood, like that's exactly what she is, no more, no less. Because if you look at her analyst, her research department, which of course I've exposed in a previous video, like they're all unqualified kids. They're like a bunch of kids that don't have any Wall Street experience. None of them. I mean, it's almost like she went to YouTube and like got these guys. But when you're a pumper, it's best to recruit an army of pumpers that are ignorant, that don't really know anything, right? Why would you want to recruit an experienced, competent analyst who would say, Cathie, what are you talking about? Well, this is nonsense, right? It's funny, Cathie Wood's supposed to be about innovative, right? What is it? Disruptive innovation, right? Disruptive, Cathie, really? So why didn't you buy Moderna early on, like I advised in March of 2020? Like, that's an easy call. Why didn't you buy Moderna, Cathie? Right? Think about it. Cathie Wood is a joke. And I'm just telling you right now, folks, honestly, this guy said it. Cathie Wood is just, same thing as these YouTube pumpers. She's just on a bigger scale. That's all it is. That's all it is. World War III, I wouldn't worry about World War III. I wouldn't worry about it. Listen, if you look, if you start to worry about these things, the problem with that is you got all these guys out there who do nothing but obsess over doomsday scenarios. These are the same people who've been talking about Bigfoot for 30 and 40 years and alien invasions and shit like that. Just live your life, man. I mean, like deal with stuff that's under your control, and it's more certain, right? You know what I'm saying? And that's what I tell people as well in terms of investments. I say, look, you know what? I don't catch everything, but I stay away from a lot of the uncertainty. I stick to things that I'm more certain about. I leave the uncertainty to everybody else, right? And when you do that, you're going to miss some big winners, but you're not going to get blown out. You see? Anyway. But the Cathie Wood story is a great example. It's a great example, a great reason why people sometimes need a financial advisor. I can't tell you how many comments I've read all over the internet. And it's easy to say, "Oh, that person's an idiot." Oh, you mean you risked your retirement on Cathie Wood's fund? That was stupid. But yeah, it's easy to say that, but ignorance is not knowing, right? It's not being stupid. It's you don't know. So how do you know better if you don't know, right? So, and I've told people this for a long time, and people, of course, don't agree with me. And I said, look, the worst thing probably that's ever happened was, and this was after I wasn't working officially on Wall Street, so I didn't have like an agenda. But I said the worst thing, from what I can tell, that's ever happened was for online trading, for trading to be so easily accessible to everybody. That's the worst thing for them to ever happen, because they're going to blow themselves up. Okay? They're going to blow themselves up. And the financial media plays a big role in that. I can tell you that, 15 years ago, 20 years, let's say 20 years ago, they didn't have all these shows on CNBC, Fast Money and all these trading shows. They didn't talk about shorting stocks. Now, of course, it's all about trading and shorting stocks. And you know why? Right? You know why? Because most people are using self-directed investment accounts. They're not going through a financial advisor. And what that means is that when you blow yourself up shorting a stock, and let me tell you, I don't short stocks often at all. It's the riskiest thing to do, and you should only do it under the most extreme circumstances. Like, for instance, when I wrote about shorting the subprimes and Fannie and Freddie in a book. Nobody else did that in the world. But the reason why they talk about all this stuff now is because most people don't have financial advisors. If you have a financial advisor, do you understand that in most cases they're not going to let you short a stock? They're not going to put the order in for you. Did you know that? Anybody know that? And you know why? Because they are responsible to some degree. They're responsible for your account. That's where suitability comes in. Okay? If you are going on Fidelity or E-Trade or Schwab or wherever, all you got to do is click a button, short, boom. It's that simple. Okay? It's a very risky thing to do for many reasons. I rarely short a stock or even think about it. It's extremely risky. And people don't understand how risky it is, just like they don't understand how risky margin is. Okay? But you see, I've lived through, I've been in the business. I've worked on Wall Street and seen where people get completely blown out because they were short a biotechnology company, let's say, and then the next day, pre-market, they announce an approval for a drug and the stock goes to the moon. Okay? So I've seen that over and over again. So, yeah. Well, I bet you Kevin's selling puts now. And selling puts, that's also very risky. It can be done prudently, but you have to have the right mindset. But legally speaking, and I'm talking about in terms of securities regulations, selling puts is considered very risky. Okay. So, and if you don't understand risk, and that's another important thing about an investment, you got to understand risk, right? Nobody talks about risk. Media is not going to tell you about risk. They never mention the word risk. Why? Well, they don't care. The objective is to, and you all understand how the media works. CNBC, they got all these girls with cleavage, talk about fast money. It's all psychological. I mentioned this before, and I wrote an article about it about 10 years ago, how this stuff is done intentionally with the media. They have these girls who are often, fairly attractive, and they make, sometimes they're wearing sexy outfits. They got the cleavage, this and that. And they do this. Why? Because the sexual thoughts, they hit the pleasure center of the brain, which releases dopamine. Okay. And this is the same thing. It's the same chemical reaction, neurotransmitter reaction that occurs when people gamble. It's the same mechanism. This is all intentional. I'm telling you. People don't know this, but it's true. So, and by the way, you've got this same thing kind of going on with some people on YouTube. Kevin is notorious for this, right? Back and forth, panic. And what he's doing is this is a very dangerous thing that he's doing, and he's adversely impacting people who are vulnerable to this type of dynamic that occurs in the neurotransmitter pathway. I'm telling you, folks. If you don't believe me, you should research these things, because the media, CBC is a great example of this. They intentionally do this stuff. And, you can read that article I told you about, Deep Capture, the website Deep Capture. Patrick Byrne, he didn't write it. I don't think his associate did, but he exposed Jim Cramer and his whole cove of buddies and his whole system. Mike Milken. Anybody remember Mike Milken? Right? Anybody remember Mike Milken, the junk bond king from the savings and loan crisis? Now Mike Milken is, Fortune 500 list. They talk about him being a philanthropist. They don't tell people how he defrauded investors, and he was supposed to go to jail for 10 years. Oh, but the SEC and the Department of Justice let him keep the $500 million that he robbed from people. But guess what? He didn't even go to jail for 10 years. He served a year and a half in Club Fed. You see, this is what I'm talking about. This whole, it's Occupy Wall Street was the closest thing that we came to in this country of really getting serious about the shit that's going on. And it's unfortunate because that was the only chance that we had. And that was, of course, muzzled. It's just, it's unfortunate. Most people don't really understand what's going on. They, because the media distracts them with all types of nonsense, right? You got all this stuff going on with the cancel culture and the, the gays and the lesbians and the abortion rights and gun control and, Democrats, Republicans, and back and forth stuff. It's like, wait a second, where's the jobs? Like, why can't I work at General Motors like my dad and his dad before? Why is the factory overseas in China now, right? Why is my dad's pension been canceled? Because Carl Icahn came in and restructured the company and ditched the pensions. You'll understand what I'm saying. This is typical behavior on Wall Street. This is what's been going on in this country, folks. So, anyway, all I can say, there's going to be some good bargains in the market down the road. Just be patient. You might want to walk away for a while, quite a while, and when you come back, buy quality. Okay, buy quality. Don't buy the dog shit. Don't buy the Cathie Woodstocks. Okay, for the most part, anyway. Yep, that's correct. It's a big scam. It's unfortunate, and it's all by design, folks. All this stuff is by design, okay? It's all by design. Just like, for instance, how you can't have national pride for your country if you're in the West. If you say, I'm a nationalist, I have pride for my country, they call you a neo-Nazi, you see? And this is all about democratic liberal. It's all about liberal democracy, right? It's liberal democracy. That's the problem. The liberal democracy, when you think about that, that's all tied into neoliberalism, which I believe has destroyed the Western world, right? Neoliberalism. You all understand all that, right? That's why I left America. I got sick of all this garbage. You have to lock your doors. You can't talk to your neighbors because they might be a psychopath, and you have all this crap going on. And it's getting worse every year. The Western world is under assault and has been for a long time, and there's really no stopping. There's many people leaving the West to go to countries that are not as, the corruption's it's a different scale. It's a different type of corruption. You're going to have corruption everywhere, but I can tell you, you look at America, and it's virtually impossible unless you have a very fast metabolism. I believe it's virtually impossible if you live in America, and increasingly, say, the UK, to live in America, and as you get older, to not become obese. Think about that. Everybody's obese unless they have a really high metabolism, or they're extremely fixated on not getting fat, and they exercise, right? It's just bizarre. This tells you the excesses in consumption in this country. And right? And it's honestly, these people that are obese, it's not their fault. I don't see it as their fault. This is a system that we live in this country. If you live in America, chances are very high, past 30 or past 40 anyway, you're going to be obese. You have to work extremely hard mentally and maybe even physically to avoid the obesity trap in this country, right? So, anyway, Bigfoot, yeah. Anyway, folks, all right, I'm gonna head on out here now, and you know, and I'm sure there's some lurkers here hiding. Some of these guys that I've been talking about, or maybe some that I haven't talked about because I've only mentioned like two names really, right, or maybe three. Meet Kevin, Tom Nash. Uh, I'm sure there's some others here lurking around. Folks, call these people out, right? Remember, ask the question, how are you qualified to be talking about something as important as investment advice? This is a very important situation. How are you qualified to do so? If you're talking to somebody at a coffee table in the privacy or something like that, it's a different story. When you're going on a global platform and you're doing that, okay, and you can imagine you've got like all these guys following each other, right? You can imagine. I can guarantee if you look back, a year ago, you had all these people basically pumping, most of them anyway, pumping the same stocks, and they were the Cathie Wood stocks, right? In fact, I should make an index. I should make an ETF, an inverse ETF about comprising the stocks that I've heard about from these YouTube people. It's too late now because most of them have been collapsed, right? Like I never heard of SoFi in a firm in Upstart until I saw YouTube. I never heard of them, but I sat there and watched them collapse, and they go lower probably. You see, I never heard of that stuff.